Hey everybody, welcome to Automation Tech Talk. Look at that. I haven't done this in a couple of weeks. I was out of town, so I'm hoping you can all hear me okay. Everything looks good on my side. I'm actually in my office working on a lot of website stuff today. Not that I want to, it's just that I don't have a web designer. But in any case, I have a special guest to come on the show here. Let's see if I can do this. Um, Emil is coming on, and he's going to talk with me about AI. So without further ado, let me bring him in. And let's do this. Emil, if you could, please introduce yourself to the audience. I know some folks are watching this live. Some folks are going to be watching this after the fact, but please tell them who you are, what you do, what your company does.
Yeah, I'd love to, Sean. Thanks so much for having me on the show. This is a ton of fun. In a former life, not many decades ago, but a decade ago, I used to do a lot of YouTube stuff myself, way, way, way before now running a company. So it's really fun to be back and doing live streams. But by way of intro, I'm Emil. I'm one of the co-founders of Kappa. We help companies turn their technical documentation into AI assistants that actually work. We started in software dev tools. A lot of the folks we partner with are companies like Docker, Sentry, Grafana, OpenAI themselves all use Kappa to power their sort of customer-facing AI assistants. But the reason for us talking today is as we keep growing and as a company, we've also started to realize that a tool like Kappa works really, really well for complex hardware companies. And much like we talked about, I think, leading up to this call as well, um, there's some really, really interesting use cases in the industrial automation space. From our learnings over the last couple of months, we've been working with folks like Silicon Labs, Nokia, Juniper Networks, all very hardware-focused companies that drown in data sheets and PDFs with lots of field techs working on stuff that requires grounded technical answers. Everyone's running around trying to make AI work for their thing, and we've got this thing that works really, really well that we're excited to kind of share with more folks. So I'm just excited to be on this call. This is just as much for me a learning journey into the world of PLCs and SCADA and all things industrial automation, but really excited to be here and share a little bit more about what Kappa is and how it works.
Well, and here in the States, a lot of us call it SCADA. So you're going
SCADA,
to
there
hear
you go.
it's like
You can see I'm a
process
rookie.
versus process, and it depends on where you live and what region you're in. But in any case, yeah. So if we go back in the day when I got started in '90, I would ship people boxes of manuals. An engineer or a tech, they needed to service a system or design a system. I would have to ship them a physical box, usually like a banker box sized box, full of paper manuals. And you can imagine they were very expensive to print, but we would order them from the factory and then we'd send them to the local engineers. And when PDFs come out, and one of the great things we had was something called a data disk from Rockwell. So my background, my first 25 years was doing Rockwell stuff. And the data disk, late 90s, I still have my 99 edition, and I actually still use it because sometimes it's the fastest way to find PDFs on the old products. Some of them which disappear from now and again from Rockwell's website. But in any case, the data disks, we had these CDs and we could copy all the PDFs to our hard drive, and if we had one big enough, and that was just great because you could pull up the PDF for product X and search it for wiring diagram or wiring, and but today, as I think over the last few years, a lot of us have started getting frustrated, especially around 2000, 2019, 2018. You know, a lot of us got frustrated with search. Search broke, and when I say this is my own opinion. Search broke because um, when you were looking something, you typically only saw ads, and the things that weren't ads were people who were trying to sell you something and just figured out the SEO score so they could rank high enough, but not really answer your question. And it was such a frustrating thing. And then AI came along. And just like our Alexa and Siri, and I shouldn't say that too loud, smart speakers and smart devices got really good at telling us, I do this on a regular basis for like, got my hands full doing something else, making lunch or something. In the morning, I'll say, what's the weather going to be like today? Or when's the next Patriots game? And they've really gotten so good at not only understanding weird accents like my own, but also understanding the context in which our questions are asked. And then, the Chat GPTs, the Groks, the Geminis, they all take it to the next level. And I'm going to be honest with you. I was just dealing with a MariaDB versus MySQL incompatibility for two databases, and ChatGPT, and I'm sure the others would have done it as well, walked me through why they didn't work and what I had to do, and gave me a PowerShell script I needed to run to change the format of some of the tables. And long story short, I was so appreciative of having that ability to have this I don't know, next gen search engine. This thing is so good at taking information from so many sources and then providing it to me. And it didn't get everything right. And I corrected it several times in the hope that, maybe in the future somebody else, it'll help somebody else. But it got me where I needed to go. And so I even do that for personal things. Like somebody said, did you know there's a law that says you have to inspect your car a second time if even if it's just was expected a day ago? And I searched it up, and granted, the crazy people in Massachusetts passed this crazy law that makes you have to reinspect your car if you buy a car that was just inspected, you have to reinspect it. So, you know, it's really the next generation of search, in my opinion, and it's so much more usable. But what do we do in a plant? So I got a plant full of either engineers or maintenance people, and they have all these documents, these PDFs from years of equipment operation and installation, or maybe PLC manuals, and you need to take all this stuff and put it together, and you want to search on it like you do Chat GPT. Is that what your company does? Or let me pitch it back to you to tell us exactly
Yeah.
what your company does.
Yeah, why don't I do that? And I'm a big believer in showing as opposed to
Okay.
telling. So why don't I go ahead maybe and share screen if
Okay,
that's all
I'm
right with
gonna
you?
see if I have the right one. Nope, that's my computer. I'm gonna have you reshare.
Yeah, let's see if I can do this here.
Okay,
Amazing.
it's coming up. All right, so let me add it to the
Yes.
stage there. Can you see it on your side as well?
I can see it on my side
Okay,
indeed.
great. Great.
Amazing. But yeah, let me give some context on maybe how we work together with folks. But I'm a big believer in kind of setting the stage before we just get in, because I think it's always fun to look at products, but if you don't sort of really contextualize what problem are they solving, and how do you empathize with that as a user, it can be a little bit hard to like understand a demo and so on, right? And I really want to make this a conversation too, Sean, because this is much as it is for you. I think I'm just here to also learn and talk about, like, begin wrapping my head more and more around industrial automation. But essentially, the problem and our reason for being around is exactly as you called out there with kind of your question, right? Most products over time they get complex, whether it's a database product, um, whether it's a cool new software tool, or whether it's like a you know Nokia server. And people are digging around. I love your analogy of kind of bringing it back, saying, hey, in the 90s, we were carrying around boxes of manuals, and now we have them on a searchable PDF. Um, that problem just applies pretty much everywhere when you're dealing with complex products. And we've got this wonderful new generation of stuff, right? AI or large language models that appear to be able to help. But for really mission critical use cases, right? Like being on a plant, I could imagine, or, having your server go down or something like that. You just can't have these things make stuff up. It's too high risk and you
Yeah.
lose trust with systems.
Yep.
But it turns out if you really engineer around this, you can really make these models stay very factual, very grounded on information like data sheets and PDFs and so on.
Yeah, and let me
And
throw
that,
that out there. That's a huge problem because if I'm in a plant, I can't accept Chat GPT telling me to do something that's wrong. And I may not have the time. So when a general AI is giving me the answers and nothing of what it's telling me is on the screen I'm looking at, that's frustrating. Again, I'm using this tool for free,
yeah,
and this is not mission critical. I'm not stopping $1 million a minute production line. But when you're in a serious place, you cannot,
yeah.
hallucinations is one word they use. You need it to be right. You can't have it making stuff up. So let me turn it back to you.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, that is really the setup, and that's what we're around to solve. So I guess some credibility on our side, right? So we do this. We do this for about 200 companies, mainly in the software and sort of hardware and networking space, where we work with companies like a Docker, like an OpenAI, like a ClickHouse, like a Juniper Networks to index all of their complex product documentation and provide one grounded AI assistant that they can give to their internal engineers working at these companies, but also directly to their customers. So to make this maybe a little bit more concrete, I thought I'd bring along a case or an example
Yeah,
that we can
please.
also show and tinker with. Um, Silicon Labs, awesome company. They make some of the coolest semiconductor chips and so on the market. Incredibly complex suite of products. So many PDFs, so many data sheets. They do a wonderful job on their website indexing this, but it is still really, really tricky for folks to kind of work with us. So we've been working with them for close to 2 years. By putting a product like Kappa front and center, essentially an AI chat that looks like ChatGPT, but sits in front of their users and knows about all their complex specs. We can even go and use this. This is kind of fun. If you go to scilabs.com, it could be their docs, it could be their main site. You'll see that they now have an Ask AI feature that sits at the top right on their website that you can click on. That'll open up Kappa. So that's us down here. We power this and ask it any question you might run into about their products, right? Whether you're an engineer that's like, struggling, trying to figure out, hey, my super niche chip that I'm working on, like what's the storage temperature of EZR 32WG, something very specific. A thing you have to do with these things is occasionally bake them, which sounds wild. And you can see that, Kappa will immediately answer. It'll refer over to the specific data sheets, that are hosted and look really complex. Kappa immediately searches through all that information, thousands of chipsets, and it's able to sort of ground that answer and link over to sources. You can keep going too. Ask it questions like, what else, should I be aware of? Right. And one of the cool things about Kappa, other than, it acts a lot like a chat GPT that you'll be used to, is that it is so grounded in all of this content. So, we'll be able to go and say things like, oh, beyond the storage temperature, you should also really, check the data retention impact, maximum soldering temperature if you get into this. But you'll notice throughout, it keeps grounding everything in data sheets and documents. And that's really what we do in our focus is we're a research team that does everything we can to make the models as truthful and honest as they possibly can. So, a big publicly listed company like Silicon Labs that has these thousands of data sheets, they can very confidently put this front and center on their website, whether it's through a modal like this or on their directly on their technical documentation, that you can access pretty much anywhere. There'll be an Ask AI button to navigate from. And it turns out this is incredibly helpful, right? For their field engineers that are out working with customers. Matt, awesome field engineer at Silicon Labs, uses it to chase down specs himself he needs instead of going to poke subject matter experts, via email or on Slack or creating tickets and then waiting for folks to come back. So customers can much more quickly build in Silicon Labs. And you can imagine the impact for customers themselves if they can get the expertise of a good, subject matter expert directly on the Silicon Labs website. The impact there, right, is just it's so vast. You never have to carry around the big box of data sheets or even your data disks anymore.
I wish some of the vendors I use, I won't name names, but the big names in industrial automation had this on their website because and I'm not saying they're bad, but I'll put in the article number or the part number or the model number. Everybody has a different word for it. And a lot of times I'll get a bunch of certifications, like here's our CE certification. Like I could care less about that. Some some guy who's putting together a bid package has to provide all that proof. That's maybe 1% of the people are going to be using the search. And I want manuals. Give me the manuals. Give me the
Yeah,
wiring diagrams. And sometimes it can be hard on some of these vendors' websites, and they just throw everything at you. It's like, dude, can't you narrow it down to like you put in that part number? Can't you narrow it down? I just want
right.
stuff about this. Like there
Yeah,
is no VFD in this PLC part number. Why am I seeing VFD results, And for crying out loud, get rid of all those certifications and get rid of it's like who uses that? And please don't show me things that are not in my language. Oh my word, it's like I'm on the US site. Please default to US language. Please default to English, right? And give me a button if I want to go to Spanish or something else. But just give me,
yeah.
if I'm in France, I don't want everything coming up in English all the time. I want it coming up in French, right? And so I could definitely see where some of the end users could do this as well. Now, have you worked with any software companies to embed this into their software products? So you just showed it on a web page, which I think would be great. And the second question is, have you worked with any companies to deploy this in their facility, maybe as an internal AI system?
That's a great question. The short answer is yes, 100%. When Kappa is rolled out, it's usually rolled out in sort of one or three ways.
Okay.
Now, this is just kind of giving you the high level product overview, but the way to think about a system like Kappa, if you're a Silicon Labs, if you're a vendor, is four parts, right? It's hey, what data am I curating? What data sheets am I adding to my instance to be able to ground it on the information that it should answer questions for. Then, secondly, it's passing through our what we call our answer engine. But the way to think about this is what we spend the most time on is figuring out, how to make these systems as accurate and as good as possible, because that's how you build trust. That's how someone like a Nokia, Juniper Networks will really trust you to put this in front of their users. And then, thirdly, to your point, Sean, right? It's great. Now you have this set up. Where do you like how do you get this in the hands of your users or your engineers, whether they're on the plant, so it's right there when you need it. From
Yeah.
our side there, we do it in kind of three ways. We have what we call our Ask AI module. This is really what you saw here for Silicon Labs or a Nokia. Makes it really easy to just put in front of your users. You can also use the same APIs, the same like widgets to put directly in your product. That's really common for
Okay.
folks to do. um, you can also put it directly in your support flow. So, if you're
Oh,
head of support at one of these companies, turns out it's really helpful just to, give folks an answer, an AI generated answer before they fill their ticket. You can actually, in most cases, like, what is it? On average, is about in a third of cases, you're able to help the user right away as opposed to having them wait for support. And for the company, that also just means better support efficiency. And then finally, you nailed it. Most of these companies have secret hidden internal stuff for debugging a lot of these tools that they
mhm.
might not want to get out in the hands of the users.
Yeah.
So this we also index, but then of course lots of data security involved here to make sure that that only would be accessible to internal folks.
Well, that's
So
that's
that
very
that
cool. Yeah.
that's it. And then the final thing I'll say, and then I'll stop here, is it turns out if you are a Silicon Labs, the most valuable thing with a system like that this isn't necessarily unblocking your users right away, but it's actually getting all this information feeding through your system. Because once you have all this information feeding through a system like Kappa, you actually have real high quality intent of what your users are trying to do. Right? What are they trying to do with your latest chipset, with your latest software product,
Mm.
with your latest controller, and you can see what the model is unable to answer and what it is able to answer. And it turns out when the model is unable to answer something, that's usually a really good sign to you as a product lead that your users are trying to do something that isn't possible today. So maybe you should go build it.
Well, yeah, good point. And I want to ask this question too. So
Yeah.
the tech support case I think is phenomenal. There were a couple of websites
Yeah.
where their AI chat answered my question. I didn't need to send in a ticket. And I thought that was
Amazing.
so helpful because you search the knowledge base, and these were outside of automation, but you search the
Yeah.
knowledge base, you don't come to anything even close. Then you go to submit, then they give you the AI, and it's like, okay, yeah, let's try this, and it's like, wow, that worked. And
Yeah.
so, but I can see because a lot of these companies, these big industrial automation companies, they have some really like just super smart people in tech support. And I'm wondering if you've had any of your existing customers actually not only use this to kind of pre-screen the calls, but
Yeah.
also have the tech support people like like helping make it better because they know the stuff inside and out, and they can, how have you worked with any tech support groups inside a company to say, hey, we're going to use these amazing tech support guys who answer questions all day long to make the model even better over time?
Yeah, 100%. How this usually plays out is, maybe I can show a cool page or visual here, but like how it usually plays out um, is really through the flywheel effect you see down here at the bottom. So what this means is for most companies, like their documentation is great, but it can only answer 80% of the questions coming in.
Mhm.
The cool thing is we'll give you visibility on what those 20% that it can't answer are. And usually what ends up happening in most companies is they will then, with all the time they save, that their support engineers no longer have to like answer these repetitive questions that a user actually could have just found if it was at, like if they had looked around and page
Right.
237 off like the PDF published in 2008. They can actually spend time like using their expertise on the more engaging stuff to write new content, to update the data sheets, to improve it so the model itself gets better.
Oh, okay.
um, so for sure you had the nail on its head.
So I guess the model can research so it's not static. If I update the tech note in the database, my
Oh yeah.
existing, it'll find that on its next search and go around. So it's
Oh
not
yeah.
static. Okay. Well, that's good.
Oh
That's
yeah.
really good. Yeah,
All
because
that stuff
sometimes
stays.
it's all about a keyword, or it's like, yeah, you got to put this one keyword in there. People are searching for X while you keyword it with Y. They can't find it.
Yeah. No, you hit the nail on its head. I mean, now we're getting into like cool product stuff, but imagine, you work at one of these vendors, like what you're doing is you're trying to always nurse and manage the chatbot. You're in the platform that sits behind, Kappa here. This is a demo instance we have, to look at, but you're looking at how many chats are people having with the bots? What share of responses is the bot actually able to handle, and what can't it handle?
Mhm.
And then where things get really interesting is you can begin to, of course, review individual conversations, which, is cool. You can see, how people are trying to figure out how to do certain things with,
Yep.
with your tool. But most interestingly, you can actually look at some of the cases where the bot is simply unable to answer a question. So here's a demo setup where lots of people were trying to figure out how to hide a button, and nowhere was the model able to handle that use case. So the bot will just say, "Hey, that's not possible," and then it'll let the admins know, that, hey, this is something I should go and go ahead and update. And then in
Yeah.
parallel, you have your whole source infrastructure that just stays up to date in kind of real time. Um,
So explain the source infrastructure a little bit to maybe people who haven't used an AI assistant in the past.
Yeah, it's a great question, or great point. So again, the way to think about these models is you have to ground them in something. If you don't, like, it'll rely on the model it happened to, or the stuff that was pre-trained on at any certain point in time. Um, and you don't want that, especially if you have a big big name associated with yourself. There's a lot of
Yeah.
reputational risk of hallucination. So the way to fix that is grounding it in all of your content, grounding it in your data sheets, grounding it in your different products and your different versions. It's figuring out, like, I ship this version that date, I ship this product that date, setting up all this infra. So what you essentially can get to is a point where you have this universe of source material about your product. You can see, here for our demo instance, we have things like documentation, API references, and blogs, and so on, all set up here. Um, that then automatically gets put into the model's brain. And then whenever you go ahead and deploy that through one of those methods we talked about, like on your website, like Silicon Labs, to field engineers on their phones, on their tools, etc., then it always comes back to these sources. Um, so that's where things get kind of fun.
And so your company specializes in helping bring AI to other companies. So
Yeah.
um,
Silicon
uh,
Labs. Yeah.
Silicon Labs. I was going to say Silicon
Yeah.
Valley. Silicon Labs. they're not an expert on deploying AI to look at their documentation. And so they hire you, and this Kappa
Yeah,
AI is what you work with them to use, and I'm sure you're resting on
yeah,
some other technology stacks, but you're bringing it all
oh yeah.
together for them to be really being the guy who makes everything come together.
Yeah, you hit the nail on its head. I mean, we're a fast growing Y Combinator backed venture backed startup, come out of San Francisco. All this stuff. Like all we do is work with the top most fast moving software companies in the world to really get this in front of their users. Because most companies are starting to realize, where they can really truly get value from spending time doing AI development is doing things that only they can do. For a Logitech, it's like figuring out how to deploy AI very deeply into their products and so on. They shouldn't go figure out how to index all their data sheets. It turns out that, a team of very, very smart researchers and engineers that all they do is figure that out. They'll probably do a much better job and they'll consistently make things better.
Yeah.
Um, the data sheets one is interesting. I actually brought this along.
Oh yeah.
Because one of the research topics we've gone really deep at is technical data sheets and PDFs. Um, you know, Maybe you've tried, Sean, as well, like uploading like some of these manuals to tools like ChatGPT and Claude and so on, and just seen at times they just struggle to understand some of this content.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. That's not what these systems are designed to do, especially when you get in this very technical domain, right? Like diagrams, tables, they don't parse super well. You very often deal with like decades of like product history and
Yeah.
version history,
Yep.
really tricky to deal with. Um, you don't usually have citations that come out of the box with these tools. And the natural thing you want to do if you get an answer from an AI system is you actually want to dig in, get under the hood, right, and understand where did that answer come from. So from our side, how we solve this is really just checking all of those boxes, right? Like we know we have to very carefully take into account, things like diagrams, things like product versions. We need to cite every single source wherever we derive a fact in an answer, so an engineer can actually go and verify in the source material that that is in fact how this works for the context of the system. Um, so it's really fun, really tricky engineering stuff, but that's really why what we're around and what we focus on.
Yeah, I think I can see from my audience. An audience chime in. I'd love to hear if you think I'm off on this, but I definitely see the end user who has just thousands of PDFs that he needs to keep on hand to solve problems in his plant.
Yeah,
And, he's built these very extensive folders, folder structure, and
yeah,
it's just like it's like and he's like, we need a next generation. This is we can't keep doing it, especially with all the people who are retiring. We need to
yeah,
be more efficient at getting the data out of these manuals. I think the second would be an engineering firm. They're going to have a much different need. They don't have a stack of manuals. Maybe it's specifications. Maybe they're looking for jobs and quotes, and
yeah,
they need to reference, maybe even PLC programs or different things that go with different projects. I know it can be difficult. Um, say, hey, what library? Wouldn't it be great if I could say, hey, what library did I use on the Smith job last year? And they say, "Oh, you use library Rev 235." It's like, okay, good, yeah, and then I can see, of course, the vendors both for internal stuff
right,
because they have, all these large vendors that make automation products. They have thousands of vendors supplying them with, the components. So they have their own engineering needs, but also on the tech support side, I hope some of them reach out to you
yeah,
because they're so 90s. I mean, I shouldn't say
yeah,
90s. They're so 2000s with their search engines and with all the new focus on specifications, CE this, UL that, and EU this, and it's like, oh my word, it's like almost 90% of all the documentation out of these things that 99% of the users will never want to look at. That's for a niche case for those niche people who need it, and it should be in there, but it shouldn't be the first thing we see. And so I'd love to see some of these use cases. And again, audience, even if you're watching this after the fact, of course, your comments will be public, so we both can go and look at them and see what your thoughts are. And let's talk about here as we're getting to the end of the show. If somebody is interested in learning more, what's the next step?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, um, just reach out. I'll leave my email here. Go to our company website. You can also request sort of a personalized walkthrough demo and so on. We're really big believers in showing and not telling. There's so much hype around, AI and kind of the modern day and age. And, we've worked with so many companies now. We're so proud of the product we have. We know it works so well in these very complicated products. So reach out. We'll get a demo spun up for you really quick. A lot of this stuff is public, all these data sheets. So just shoot me a personal email. I'll make sure that we can spin something up pretty quickly too. You told me not to pick sides, Sean, when we spoke earlier this week between the Rockwell, Siemens, and Schneider, and so on, right? So I definitely haven't, and I don't pick sides. But I was quite surprised when I did a big scan to see none of them having something like this live front and center. I mean, this is the
Uh,
lowest hanging fruit. This is the most impact they can have in essentially a matter of weeks to get something like this spun up and live in front of their users.
Well, and we know that they're all working on them in their development packages. As a matter of fact, in early January, I will be having one of those big three, and we cover more than just those three. I don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
We are fans of all, like a sports car fan is a fan of sports cars. We're a fan of
Yeah.
automation, but I do know that a lot of them are working on their own AI to build into
Yeah.
their software, but I can definitely see that this could help jumpstart their efforts. And we will be covering AI, especially co-pilots, AI assistants,
Yeah.
in the coming 2026. We already have the first one scheduled, and we hope to get all the manufacturers on. If you're a vendor, we'd love to get you on the show. Whether you come on the automation podcast and show, or you come on the Tech Talk Live, we'd love to have you on to talk about this more. And Emil, I'd love to get you back on maybe in 6 months and tell
Yeah.
us what's new and exciting. Maybe have some more case studies.
Yeah, I'd freaking love that, Sean. This was such a blast. I really appreciate you having me on here and just having hopefully a fun and engaging conversations for your audience as well.
Yeah, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in, whether you watch live or if you watched after the fact. Really appreciate all you guys. I will be back next week. Um, I have some hands-on I want to do. I don't know. We got podcasts coming. We got hands-on coming. So I'm still building demos at the kitchen table at night. So we got more of those. And I want to say thanks to everybody who said thanks in the chat as well. And but with that, we have an outro. We have to put an outro in because LinkedIn and some other sites were cutting off the very end of the show. So we have the 15-second out roll. So if you're wondering why that's there, you'll know. But thank you all very much for watching. Emil, thank you for coming on. Look
Of
forward to
course.
doing this again sometime.
Yeah, right back at you, Sean.
All
Have a
right.
good rest of your day, all. Bye bye.
Yep. Happy holidays, everybody. Until next time, peace.